What's up, guys? Welcome back to Daddy Dimes Radio, episode 14. We're going to be starting off with our NBA playoff predictions and play-in recap.
All right, guys. Yeah, we'll be posting a short later today on some highlights from day one of the first round of the NBA playoffs. Lots already happening between the Jazz Mavs and the Grizzlies versus Wolves. But let's go again and get into the play-in recap.
The Pelicans beat both the Spurs and the Clippers to secure the 8th seed.
Yeah, we really did not see this one coming. I thought the Spurs would beat them, but no, they surprised me. CJ McCollum continues to really show that he doesn't need Dame to be a star. And then they beat the Paul George-less Clippers, which we kind of did see coming after they looked really good against the Spurs, and then Paul George tested positive. Any other thoughts from you?
No, yeah, CJ McCollum been playing really good, but they have a very tough matchup in their first round against the Suns. So, very, very low chance of them advancing after the first round, playing such a great team in the Suns. But, yes, like you said, CJ McCollum playing really well, showing that he doesn't need Dame, and a lot easier to beat the Clippers without Paul George.
Then let's move on to a team that's really doing well against the Grizzlies right now. The Wolves secured the 7th seed that they already held by knocking off the Clippers, who did have Paul George for that game. But the Timberwolves played very well and had a very excessive celebration at the end of the game, especially from Patrick Beverley playing the team that got rid of him. Wolves making the playoffs for the first time in I think 18 years is what I heard, but I'm not sure. Don't quote me on that.
The Nets beat out the Cavaliers for the 7th seed.
Yeah, both 7 seeds held their positions by knocking off 8 seeds. Then both 8 seeds ended up losing as the Hawks beat both the Hornets and the Cavs. Of course, the Cavs without Jarrett Allen, I think, for both games. I know at least for the Nets. But Hawks, of course, a very talented team that's been very disappointing this year after making the Eastern Conference Championship last year and really impressing us even with their youth. But I felt like their youth showed more this year. But maybe they can make another great playoff run if they're able to upset the Miami Heat in the 1-8 seed matchup. Let's go ahead and get into that as we go into our series predictions.
Yeah, so going into the Heat versus the Hawks, personally, I think the Hawks will be able to take one game off the Heat. The Heat, just such a good team, having a lot of really good players, Jimmy Butler, Kyle Lowry, Duncan Robinson, and many others. And then I think the Hawks will be able to take one, but then I think it'll be a 5-game series. The Heat will take the rest of the 4.
Yeah, I agree there with pretty much everything you said. And, yeah, like you said, the Heat are very deep. They have 10 guys with, the emergence of Gabe Vincent and Max Strus this year when they had injuries. But Victor Oladipo's back, who, of course, is now coming off the bench. But when you have Victor Oladipo coming off the bench, that really shows you're a good team.
Yeah. Moving on to our next game, the Celtics versus the Nets. What do you think about that?
Yeah, of course. This is probably the most hyped up series, as, of course, the Nets are one of the most talked about teams in the NBA. I would say second most behind the Lakers, who, of course, couldn't even manage to make the play-in. But I like the Celtics in this one because they have the top stat-wise ranked defense. And even it's a battle between what I think are 2 of the top 3 duos, because you have James Harden, Joel Embiid, of course, in the league. But then for the Celtics, you got Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown with that wing duo, and then Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant in an excellent offensive duo as well. But Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown much stronger on defense, and so is their team with guys like Marcus Smart and Derek White. What are your thoughts on that matchup?
Yeah, I also agree that the Celtics are going to be able to pull out with that amazing defense. Like you said, best stat-wise. The Nets, they do have Kyrie Irving and KD, but I just don't think unless they both have super, super good games for the entire series, I think the Celtics, they're a good title contender in the Celtics there. I think they'll be able to pull it out.
And then we have the Bucks versus the Bulls, which of course the Bucks, the reigning NBA champions, taking on a surprising team, the Bulls, but they've cooled off a lot in the second half of the season, and they've really struggled to beat big teams. What are your thoughts on that one?
I think the Bucks are going to win this one in a 6-game series where I think the Bulls will be able to take 2 away from them, but I think the Bucks will be very dominant because the Bulls, if they can stop Giannis, then they have a lot better chance. But if they let Giannis run free, they absolutely don't stand a chance.
Yeah, the Bulls have a decent defense, but I don't think they have anybody that can stick with Giannis. Patrick Williams is an excellent defender at the small forward, power forward position, but he just doesn't have the same height and size as Giannis. Really, nobody can match him physically. But I don't even know, like you said, going to Game 6, I could very see it possible with all the talent Chicago has, but I could also see the Bucks sweeping them in 4 games.
Yeah, moving on to our next series, the 76ers versus the Raptors.
Yeah, this one I think is one that many people are just kind of taking the 76ers, but we've just kind of taken the 76ers every game, and they've been very good, but they've kind of disappointed because they had a really good chance at having that 1 seed, but now they're down to that 4 seed. Of course, that top 4 is very, very crowded, but the Raptors aren't very far behind. They have a tremendous record. They can beat good teams, unlike the Bulls. They might not have as much talent as the Bulls, but Fred VanVleet, Pascal Siakam have both been All-Stars. Scotty Barnes is a top 3 Rookie of the Year candidate, and OG Anunoby has shut down defense. So I think the 76ers will win, but I think it's going to 7.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think the 76ers are going to win in a 7-game series with the best duo in the NBA, James Harden and Joel Embiid. But the Raptors, like you said, Fred VanVleet, Siakam, Scotty Barnes, they will all play a huge part in the Raptors, every single one of them. So, but I think the Raptors will take it to 7, but then lose.
All right, now let's move to the Western Conference side. We're not going to do predictions more than that. We'll get into more playoff stuff next week, but we still have the Western Conference with the 1-8 matchup, Suns versus Pelicans.
Yeah, the Suns, just such a good team, like really likely title contender there. Lost to the Bucks last year, but this year they have played a lot better than last year, in my opinion, and I think they're gonna 4-0 the Pelicans.
I think the Suns really being surprising last year, and then coming up, getting that experience last year. Now they have that experience. They have a leader in Chris Paul, and I think they're going to win it all this year, which starts with the win in this series against New Orleans.
Yeah, moving on to the game that is happening right now, the Grizzlies versus the Timberwolves.
Yeah, of course, right now, I'm not currently looking at ESPN, but at the half, the Wolves were up by, I think, 2, maybe 3. I think it was 3. Been very back and forth, but there's still at least 3 more games after this one with the possibility of 6. And I think it's going to go 6 more after this one. I think it's going to go to 7. I think the Grizzlies are the safer bet, so I'm going to say them. But I think the Wolves, it's very rare to say this, but I think the Wolves, the 7 seed, have more star power than the 7 seed Grizzlies, with having Karl-Anthony Towns, D-Russ, and Edwards, versus really the Grizzlies. Depends if you count Jaren Jackson or not. I guess we'll count him. But other than John Morant, they have a bunch of tremendous role players that are much better than Minnesota's role players, but Minnesota has better stars, I think.
Yeah, I think I don't know who's winning right now, like you said, but at the start of the game today, the Timberwolves hopped on an early 11-point lead, but then the Grizzlies have battled back, and there's been a lot of 10-point differential leads, but each team has managed to come back. And like you said, I think this will go to 7, but I think the Grizzlies are going to be able to pull it out.
Yes. Then we have the Warriors versus the Nuggets. I don't know when Steph's going to make his return. I don't know if he's scheduled for Game 1. I kind of should have looked into that. But even if he doesn't return, I still think Warriors are going to win. What are your thoughts on that one?
I think the Warriors are going to win if they shoot well, and the Nuggets are going to be able to win if they can stop Draymond Green from doing his job. Then they will win.
Yeah, I mean, the Nuggets, of course, Nikola Jokic is probably a top 3 player in the league right now, reigning MVP. But outside of him, the Nuggets have been very disappointing. Of course, next year when they have Jamal Murray for hopefully a full year, I think they could nab one of the top 3 seeds in the conference. But, yeah, I see the Warriors winning this one fairly easily. And then we have a game, the only game that is finished today, the Mavs versus the Jazz. The Jazz won by 6. The Mavs did surprise me, of course, as they're without Luka by keeping it close. Jalen Brunson and Spencer Dinwiddie, their guard duo, played tremendously. But I think we're just going to have repeats of the game today with the Jazz winning. The Mavs try to stick with them, but Utah wins.
Yeah, I think the Jazz are going to be able to bring this. I think it'll be a 6-game series, but I think the Jazz are just going to be able to carry on the wins through that series. The Mavs will be able to take 2, but I think the Jazz will end up winning that.
All right, and then let's go ahead and move on to the MLB. Just going to talk about a few games, but then we have some thoughts on some teams. Let's go ahead and start out with the Orioles, of course, off to another slow start, but they did knock off the Yankees in extra innings a few nights ago. What are your concerns for the Yankees right now and in the future with Aaron Judge not getting the extension he wanted?
I think this could definitely be a big key mention in like a lot of the MLB because I believe that Judge is going to leave, but I don't know where to, and that could be a big differential in how the season is going to go with dominant teams depending where he goes. And I think if the Yankees manage to keep him, they will move up, but if they lose him, they're going down a bunch.
Mm-hmm. And if the Yankees really start to struggle and become having no chance at making the playoffs, which I don't think they will, I think they'll be a contender and will make trades to gain players at the deadline. But if they do really falter, we could see them trading Aaron Judge at the deadline.
Yeah, moving on, the White Sox are able to beat the Rays by 1. The Rays continue to skid after their hot start. What are your thoughts on them?
Of course, the Rays were the last remaining undefeated team in baseball, but now I believe they're down to 4-4. I think they'll recover just fine. Of course, they have one of the best managing and coaching staffs in the league. They're a small market team, but they always win games, similar to the old Athletics. I think they'll recover fine. The only thing that makes me question them is how hard of a division they are in, the hardest in baseball, in my opinion. And they could be anywhere from the 1 seed in that division all the way down to the 4 seed. I think they definitely stay above the Orioles, but they're a bit of a question mark, even though they're always solid. This year, we'll have to see what happens with them. Of course, we're very, very early into the season, so we haven't seen much.
Yeah, I agree with what you said. Definitely big question mark, like you said, on the Rays. And as the season progresses, we will finally start uncovering that question mark. So I want to see that happen.
Mm-hmm. The other problem with the Rays is they normally make some smart moves at the trade deadline, but they can't really go for those big money players because they're a small market team. But let's go ahead and get into the Rockies being very surprising and staying hot with their 1-run win over the Cubs. What are your thoughts on the great start for the Rockies?
I think the Rockies will be a very good team throughout the season. I do think they'll cool down, but be able to stay a good team. I don't think that they'll be a huge possible title contender this year, but I think they will be able to knock off some teams who could win the title. So that could be a huge part of the end of the season.
Yeah, I definitely don't see them winning a title, but I do see them possibly being like their division rival, the Giants was last year, coming out of really nowhere last year. Chris Bryant, was traded to the Giants last year. Now he's with the Rockies. I think he's a huge part of that. He's the leader of their team now with Trevor Story gone. And then even before that, if we look a few years further, Nolan Arenado. but they have some good pieces around him. I think when the big teams that hit dingers come into play at Coors Field, they'll lose just because they can't stick with them and they don't have the best pitching. But I think the Rockies have a chance to contend in what is a tough division. Again, another question mark team.
Yeah, the Yankees are able to beat the Blue Jays in an amazing shutout victory. What are your thoughts on a strong contender in Toronto?
Toronto now 5-3, which is not great. Well, not elite, but it is very solid, very good for what is still a young team. But they have so much offensive talent and one of the best pitching rotations. I think they're starting to build something similar to the Dodgers, and I think that is going to be the most likely World Series matchup this year, the Blue Jays versus the Dodgers. What are your thoughts on the Blue Jays?
The Blue Jays, very good team there. I think they will be a title. They could be definitely be a title contender this year, like you said with the. Yeah, so like you said, I think the Blue Jays will be a very good team this year and could possibly win it, but that'll be very tough along the road for them, I think.
Yeah, of course, their youth could be a problem for them, but I think Vlad Guerrero is on the road to winning MVP. So much talent there. But let's move into our top 10 power rankings. Levi, go ahead and get us started with your top 5 to start it off.
For my top 5s, at number 1, I have the Dodgers, the Mets, the White Sox, the Giants, and the Blue Jays.
All right, very nice, very nice. I have the exact same top 3 with the Dodgers, Mets, and White Sox. The Mets have the best record in baseball right now, and they have tons of talent, but they're obviously not as talented as the Dodgers. And so I think those top 3, that's kind of the order of talent in baseball. You can throw the Blue Jays in there, but that's where I have the Blue Jays at number 4, and then the Houston Astros at number 5.
And for my 6 through 10, I have the Astros at number 6, the Cardinals at number 7, Yankees at 8, Rockies at 9, and at the 10th spot, the Rays.
For me, I have the Giants move down to 6, just because, just like last year, I think they definitely are right now a top 5 record-wise team, but power rankings, just like last year, they don't have as much talent, which makes me put them below the Astros, even with the loss of Carlos Correa. Then we have the Yankees, who, very similar to yours, I just have the Yankees and Cardinals switch around with my Cardinals at number 8. And then I have the Rays above the Rockies switch around with you, just because I think the Rays have more talent and have a more likely chance to have a better record.
All right, moving on to our Masters overview for golf.
Yep. It's kind of been a long time since the Masters. It's pretty much been a full week since the 4th day, but we weren't really able to talk about it last time because we recorded last podcast on Saturday. So let's just go through it with the Masters overview here. Levi, go ahead and take over.
Scottie Scheffler takes first in his first career major win.
Yeah, Scottie Scheffler, he was in the top 10 pretty much the whole time, but then he really rose to the top as our leaders fell down a little bit. And like you said, his first major win. When your first major is at the Masters, that's always special. You got the green jacket. Very, very great news for him. And then Rory McIlroy, who was +1 in the first 3 days, he climbed to second place by tying the Masters record for the single best single day at the Masters by golfing 8 below par on day 4 to put himself up to 7 below par total and all the way up into second place. Very big story there.
Shane Lowry gets an impressive tied third with an early leader Cameron Smith.
Yeah, Shane Lowry kind of came up from nowhere to, in the last 2 days, get that third place, while Cameron Smith, who's one of our leaders in the first 2 days and even into the third day a little bit, falls down to a still very impressive third place. And then Colin Morikawa, the second best ranked PGA golfer, who was another early leader alongside Cameron Smith. They were going back and forth a little bit. He drops down to, again, another very impressive 5th place in the Masters in the final days. Congrats to all those top 5 guys. But then real quick, let's just talk about Tiger Woods making his big return to the Masters. And after starting off fairly well in the first 2 days, where he was about one below par most time, but then towards the end of day 2 and then on for the rest of the tournament, started to really slow down and not do as well. But he is scheduled to go into the next big tournament, which we're very excited to see, as some of my friends were predicting him to retire, but I predicted he would stay and wait for another major tournament win.
Yeah, Tiger Woods, the name that comes to mind when you just think about golf, such an important golfer in golf history there. Yeah, coming back, what most people thought he would retire, comes back, and like you said, scheduled to go in the next big tournament. So I'm hoping to see some really good play out of him in the next big tournament.
Yep. All right, guys. Thanks for watching. Have a happy Easter.